What began as a vile racist chant by members of University of Oklahoma fraternity has become a legal battle. Does the Constitution protect such speech? By now, you've likely seen the 9-second video that began it all. After the video's release, university officials acted quickly, shutting down the fraternity and expelling 2 students deemed to have played a leadership role in the chant.
I have a message for those that misuse their free speech to use racial slurs. You're a disgrace to this university. But
now the debate is over whether the punishment fits the crime, which is what my next guests are here to talk about. Joining me now are Harvey Silverglate, longtime civil rights attorney. Peniel Joseph is founding director of the Center for the Study of Race and Democracy at Tufts. Your latest book, That I Know, Stokely of Life. Good to see you both. Harvey, let me start with you. What's the answer to that question? Does the punishment fit the crime, or was that vile chant protected speech?
Well, the punishment may fit the crime, but the problem is the punishment's unconstitutional.
Why?
There's no question that that chant was protected by the First Amendment. And really, no, that's not really a viable issue. If these kids went to court to sue, they would win in a heartbeat. The thing is, I don't think they would have the guts to actually go to court.
Well, let's not discuss reality for a second. Let's discuss the Constitution. Why do you say there's absolutely no question? Because it's a public university? Is that why?
Because it's a public university, therefore the First Amendment constrains the conduct of the administration in a speech case. This is protected speech. The Supreme Court has made it very clear in a cross-burning case in Virginia that if the speech is directly threatening, then it can be punished, but if it's not directly threatening, it can't be punished.
Peniel, did he convince you?
Well, no. I mean, I think that they should have been expelled. I'm not a constitutional scholar, but I will say that every community, whether it's a public or private university, decides what actions can suddenly lead to somebody being expelled from that community. Right there, that action in terms of those, talking about lynching, the N-word, that's and if this was anti-Semitic, I would agree with the same thing. They needed to be expelled. I think that Harvey's right to the extent that if they made a legal case, who knows what would happen, but certainly the actions were justified.
Aren't you worried as a guy, an academic, about the proverbial slippery slope in this sort of situation? Even if you say, well, this language and that language clearly qualifies them for expulsion, and I don't believe it violates the Constitution. You say, how about one layer down, then one layer down, then one layer down, when an administration just doesn't like what they're hearing? What do you do with that?
No, I think free speech is different from hate speech. I think by the time you're looking at somebody talking about lynching, or what if they had said they wanted to kill Jews or Muslims, we all would have said, hey, these people should be expelled, regardless of what people are saying constitutionally, is this free speech?
But you wouldn't have said the people he just described should have been expelled, would you?
No, and first of all, hate speech is protected. There's an awful lot of Supreme Court precedent protecting the most hateful speech, the Nazis marching in Skokie. The problem is, it's very hard for us when there's an incident like this vile speech. The whole scene was vile, if you watch the video. But the Constitution protects the vile as well as the virtuous.
Well, how about the language that's used by that former United States Senator, now President of the University of Oklahoma, Boren, says they created a hostile educational environment for others. My sense is the reason they use that language is because their argument, were they sued under the Constitution, would be it's not the speech, it's the consequences of the speech. It's the environment it creates, and that is not protected. Wouldn't he be right in that case?
No, absolutely wrong. This is an attempt to sort of turn the English language around so that you don't have to use the same terms the Supreme Court has used. Supreme Court has talked about hate speech being protected, so now there's hostile environment speech. No matter what you call it, a rose by any other name, as they say, smelleth as sweet, or as bitter.
Does that hostile environment thing you?
Yeah, it does, because I think they do create a hostile environment. I'm at Tufts, and anybody who's been at any college campus, there's always these incidents of whether people are being harassed sexually or a bad racial climate, sometimes religious attacks. I think the president is exactly right. That kind of speech, if it's unpunished, does create a hostile climate on campus.
Can I just point out, the hostile environment was created not by the people who were chanting on the bus, but by whoever taped it and leaked it out. Because if it hadn't been for the leaker, these students weren't talking to anybody except themselves on a bus.
Well, if it hadn't been for the chanter, there wouldn't have been a leaker, correct? When you say the hostile environment thing, Harvey Silverglate doesn't do it, let's assume there is tangible evidence that the hostile environment that was created, assuming there was one, makes a student on that campus feel threatened. There's a young black kid who's a freshman, and he or she feels, as a result of that language, I'm scared on this campus. I'm scared to walk around on this campus. Still not a problem?
Still not a problem. On a college campus, you can't have a situation where sensitivities are so high and speech rights are so low that there's really no learning that goes on. And it just doesn't, it's especially true on a college campus.
You know, he's written, what's it called, Shadow University?
Shadow University.
Don't you worry, I mean, there is this movement to basically clamp down on any speech that is politically incorrect. And obviously this goes well beyond that. But that's the slippery slope I'm talking about. Peniel, I know you care about that.
Oh, absolutely. I'm all for free speech, and I think that if there was some presentation where somebody was saying something offensive, that's one thing. But I think you can create a hostile climate with these kind of racial slurs. And I think once they investigated this and they talked to other students on campus, people said, hey, on campus, there's only 5% black undergraduates at OU, which is the flagship campus of the state. They do feel at times a hostile environment, and that tape is sort of reflective of that.
And if they couldn't find a student at the University of Oklahoma who said those words, that I feel threatened, that I feel that I'm now in a hostile environment, would you end up agreeing with him, even if it was you had a hard time getting there, that the words alone, as grotesque as they are protected by free speech, if there's no other fallout beyond that?
Well, my concern is less about free speech protection and more about what can a university do within their purview to punish students who create a hostile environment. So I think that I don't necessarily disagree with what Harvey's saying about Constitution and free speech, but I do think that there's implications for our speech. So you can have free speech, I can have free speech as a professor, but I can actually have to pay consequences or responsibility for that speech. And here I'm saying I think the consequences were justified.
Understood. Harvey,
there's
30 seconds.
Quick. And wouldn't you like to know, if you're on a campus, who the haters are? If you don't allow them to speak, you never find out who the haters are. I feel safer knowing who doesn't like me and who does.
How about 10 seconds on that, Peniel Joseph?
I mean, I think he's right, but I think in this context, the punishment fits the crime. Not always, but right here, yes.
Harvey Silverglate, great to see you. Peniel Joseph, pleasure. Good luck with the new book. Good to see you both.